This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
City Council members talk about taxes, spending, and the city budget tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We're joined tonight by Jim Strickland from the Memphis City Council, head of the Budget Committee. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Also, Kemp Conrad, also from the Memphis City Council. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. And I should note that we were trying to have a couple more City Council members on who you both voted against the most recently passed budget. We had two more planned and didn't work out, so I should say that to our viewers and to you all, and Bill will try to balance things out as we go through the questions. Let me start with you, Jim, with a simple but really big question, which is the budget that was passed responsible and sustainable for the city?
Well, you definitely need other viewpoints on this because I'm going to say no for a variety of reasons. Let's start with the comptroller issue. I think the cuts that were made were temporary cuts as opposed to some of the cuts that like, for instance, I passed early on 100 layoffs, which would have been eliminating 100 jobs, which is a more permanent solution. It was watered down to 50. And that doesn't sound like a big difference, but it's about $3.5 million that would be a permanent cut, which would, go on for years and years. And I think that's what the comptroller was looking for, more permanent things. And
when you mention the comptroller, for those not familiar, that's the state comptroller who got into the middle of the budget debate probably in April, became public in May, saying, Memphis you're on a bad course, both from a debt point of view and a spending point of view, and you need to get things together, or potentially, worst case, the comptroller would step in and begin to make some decisions. They didn't do that, but you all had that hanging over your head, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then the other point is the point that I think I've been trying to make for years now, is that if we continually raise taxes, we will continually lose population. And to me, that's not sustainable. Then you lose population, lose tax base, raise taxes more, lose more population, raise taxes more. And we go out of this uncontrolled downward spiral.
So in some basics for folks who haven't followed it, the tax rate's going to go up in kind of two stages. It was at 311 because of the property reappraisal. To get the same amount of money, it went to roughly 336. Then you all raised another 4 cents on top of that. The City Council did, not you personally. Okay. Kemp, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you don't view this budget as sustainable or responsible. What are some of the worst things that you see in it, and how are these long-term questions not being addressed?
Well, there were a couple of good things in it. I believe it was Councilman Ford or Chairman Ford that proposed putting some more money into pave our roads. We're on a 65-year paving cycle. The average city is about 25 years. If you ride around the industrial part of town where a lot of the jobs are, you really need a Jeep or something, or a tank, because it's so bad. That was good. I think we took some money and put it towards our big debt service bond we've got coming up. I thought that was positive. Outside of just the operating budget, and I agree with Councilman Strickland, our tax rate is too high. When you're losing population or losing customers, you don't just raise your prices, and that's in effect what we did. The other issue outside of just the operating budget are these long-term costs, though. The last 3 years, we've underfunded the pension plan by $50 million. There's what's called an annual required contribution. It's not an annual suggested contribution. It's what the actuaries tell us you must put in to fund your pension plan over time, to fund your future health care liabilities over time. And there was another $100 million that we should have done this year based on the current benefits. Now, I'm not advocating we raise taxes another dollar. I think we need to make reasonable adjustments to the way we do health care and pension for employees and retirees. That was not addressed at all, and I think we need to do that.
And that $100 million goes, I think you just answered, but let me clarify, toward existing employees and retired? Because,
that's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
And
it's to fund the future liability, or basically the promises that have been made out in the future that, based on what we're doing right now, will not be kept.
And were any changes made to those formulas for current employees in terms of their long-term benefits, their long-term health care?
We did some things on the health care split where the city pays 70%, the employees pay 30%. It's been that way it's in the ordinance, but we have not been doing that until this year, although we should have been doing it. So that adjustment was made. I believe Councilman Strickland made that.
Was that enough?
No, it wasn't enough. I mean, there's another, I think, $70 million for OPEB, or future health care costs, that we should have funded out of the general fund to fund the current benefit level in the future for retirees and future retirees. And it's simply unsustainable. It's mathematical. I think that's what we're going to be hearing about from the comptroller next. We did get a letter from the comptroller. They requested information about our pension plan.
Right.
I don't know if that information's been sent yet, but I bet in the next 30 to 90 days, that'll be the next shoe to drop, and they're going to come back to us and tell us, you got to change your pension plan. Either make the changes that y'all made last year for current employees, for all employees 10 years or less, or go to some kind of hybrid defined contribution plan like the state has recently done.
Yeah, I was going to say the state recently switched, and that seems to be their, it's a Republican-dominated legislature, and so that they're going to try to push that down, and including on Memphis. One more logistical question, Jim, for you. Within, a close number, was spending increased or decreased as part of this budget, overall operating spending? Because there were some cuts in some areas. You talk about the people being cut and so on, but then you also talk about paving and certain things that came back in.
Overall, it was increased less than $10 million because, as you said, the property values went down.
Right.
The rate had increased to $3.36 just to break even on revenue. So they went from $3.36 to $3.40, which is a small increase in revenue.
Right, and a roughly $10 million increase in spending.
Probably less than $10 million.
Okay, Bill.
A majority on this city council have been on the council since 2008, and since then the tax rate has rolled back. So how do you balance what the council did against that? Is this a break in philosophy, do you think, or a challenge to that philosophy?
There's no doubt. And for the first 5 years we were on the council, we all sort of agreed that we need to reduce taxes, and we have. But frankly, we did that because we were rolling back the schools, and that gave us the opportunity to do that. This is the first year where we didn't have that, and we had to face our budget as is and make tough decisions. But our budget process was over a 2-day period, over 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. The first day we cut, and we got down to a $3.07 tax rate. We still had a couple cuts left, and probably some things we needed to address with the comptroller, which would have raised that. But instead, we didn't raise just a little bit. We raised so much that it outstripped the cuts that we made. But people, I used to hear for the last few months in City Hall that we can't cut our way out of this problem. Well, that first budget day, we showed we could. Well, we could have ended up with a 3.11 or close to a 3.11 tax rate.
And Councilman Conrad, let me put it another way to you. If the council had not adjourned from the first meeting a week before your final meeting where this all got worked out, do you think we would have the same budget and the same tax rate that we have now, or would the council have continued on that trajectory?
It's hard to say. I don't know.
Was it union pressure? I mean, that's what some people will say. Did the unions get to some council members and say, look, you can't cut? Because a lot of the cuts that you're talking about, Councilman Strickland, were people. I mean, that's the biggest expense. I mean, it was people.
I think the biggest difference was Councilman Harris was there, the last Tuesday, and he wasn't there the time before. I mean, I think the people that were going to vote for the unions were always going to vote, with the unions regardless. It's pretty obvious who those people are. And there are a lot more people down there the prior Tuesday, as well.
And this is one, just again, the 4.6 reduction, pay reduction that was done some years ago, this was reinstated as part of this budget.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And your original plan to get down to that 311 included cutting or ending how many positions?
300 through attrition and 100 through layoffs.
Okay.
And then we also eliminated 40 to 50 vacant non-public safety positions. So I guess that's a little over 400, close to 450 positions, which, as you said, if you cut significantly in city government, it's got to be people, because 2/3 of our budget are people, and we just need fewer people.
One thing I thought that was interesting is that there was a 2.5% cut in the police budget. I mean, that's one of those things people talk about, you know, serving your customer, or, excuse me, the loss of citizens. There, you know, people generally point to education, crime, and taxes. So taxes are going up. People have said, well, you don't want to cut too much of the city budget because you're going to hurt public safety. But there was 2.5% in that budget that was able to be cut. And are you two satisfied that the safety of Memphians, that crime, all that is going to be fine even with that 2.5% cut?
Well, Director Armstrong told us it would be. He told us he could manage through that. I think if you look at all the major divisions of city government, most of them have gone down. Police is the one that continues to go up. And sometimes more money is just not the answer. You know, we have to have, you know, leaders. We have to manage better. One of the frustrations that I have with the current administration is that they have to lead on some of these things. And you know, they came in 3 business days on the Thursday before when we were supposed to vote on the budget with a raft of proposals out of the 5-year plan that we asked them for. And they said, well, we're advocating for these. And then we came back the next week and they weren't. And such as the whole thing that we've been talking about sick days and bonus days, and maybe going from 13 paid holidays to 12 or 11. There is a lot of money to be saved there. We learned that if we went to a more rational paid time off program, it would add thousands and thousands, almost 10,000 additional shifts with the same employee base. So those are ways where you can make some small change and not have to lay people off, get better efficiencies. But you know, it's hard for the council and 13 of us to do that. We have to have the mayor and the administration. They've got these huge staffs. They've got the research to kind of propose that, and then we can back it, like we did on the fire attrition plan when we closed the fire stations and saved you know, several $1 million. We could never have done that on our own, but they had the research, and those of us that want a more efficient government were able to back it and host town hall meetings and get people on board for it. So those are things that the police compartment can do to not cut headcount and to work more efficiently and smarter, but the administration is going to have to take more of an active role.
And could I follow up on that?
Sure.
Every year that we've been on the council, the police division comes back at the end of the year with a couple, $2, $3, $4 million in surplus that they put back into the general fund. We always budget them more money than they use. This year that was about to end, they're going to turn back about $3 million. So I think they can handle the cut. Plus, the director said he could handle it.
But there was some, you know, frustration from the council. I don't know where you two stood on this with Director Armstrong with the police department, that they were underutilizing Blue Crush, and there'd been a bit of an uptick in crime. I think this came up in the early spring. Blue Crush, for people who aren't familiar with the term, the most visible thing is the cameras you see maybe in a parking lot or at a park or whatever.
Data-driven policing. Data-driven
policing. You realize there's a lot of crime going there, and they flood that area. Where do you guys stand on that? Are they implementing Blue Crush the way they should be?
Yeah, since that came up, it was November of last year that they basically secretly cut Blue Crush for a year and a half. What I've determined is every quarter I'm going to ask how much you're spending, how many details you're doing, are you fully implementing Blue Crush? As of the first quarter of this year, they had. Next week, I'm going to send my second email to get the information about the second quarter of this year.
Okay, Bill.
The 300 employees that will be lost through attrition, that will happen over 2 fiscal years. That was really key to getting some of the future debt payment in your eyes, Councilman Conrad.
Correct.
And about what is the figure in terms of the attrition premium for each of those 2 fiscal years beyond the one that we're about to?
Well, it's actually going to happen in 1 year. It's going to be 300.
Okay.
In this next budget year, we're going to lose 300 through attrition. We naturally lose about 450 employees a year through retirement or quitting. And if you average $63,000 per job, which is what the administration told us with health benefits and everything, $63,000 times 300 is what you'll get. The 2-year issue is, yes, we will lose 300 jobs this year, but we won't fully realize the savings of that because it may happen in March of next year.
Right.
So what we did, we cut the savings in half, that we'll only realize half the savings this year, about $9 million. We'll receive the full $18 million the next year, which is what Kemp started off talking about, how that's going to help us address our long-term debt issue because that savings can help in that regard.
So do you agree on the number of about 25 million, or is it less than that without the 100 layoffs that were going to happen outright?
It's actually, it'll be less than that this year because it's 9 million from the attrition.
Which
and
is half.
It was supposed to be 6 million from the 100 layoffs. They cut that to 3 million. So it's not going to be quite that much because they watered down the cuts.
All right.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say there's one other major thing to watch this year, and that is with interest rates going up, with the Fed's recent action ending this quantitative easing. We were informed that our
maybe ending quantitative easing.
Well, but
just the Fed watchers are playing that game. Yes.
Perhaps. But the bottom line is interest rates are going up.
Yes.
It has jeopardized our latest refinancing, and there's $10 million that we have in savings this year out of that debt refinancing. It was not the same as the scoop and toss that was done before that the comptroller blasted us for, but this one was a true refinance that had positive net present value for the city. But we may not be able to do that now, or if we do it, it may not be as beneficial this year. So that's going to be something we're going to have to really manage around as a potential $10 million hole. The other thing was, as a part of the comptroller letter, we had to shift some money around to replenish reserves. And miraculously, the administration upped some of the projections we were going to get from the Hall income tax, about $4.5 million, and it just miraculously balanced out with some other the accounting that we had to do to put in the reserve fund. Hopefully that holds true, but it may not. And so, we're just going to have to be very careful when we get our quarterly updates that we make sure we don't have a problem at the end of the year.
Let's go to some of the critics, or the folks who voted for the bill. So critics of your point of view who said things, and I'll start with you. We shouldn't be laying off people. We're still in a recession. The economy is still weak. When we lay people off, it's kind of like, the schools have just laid off 300 people. That hurts the local economy. Those people live here, spend here, and so on. What's your response to that?
First of all, our heart goes out to all those people that will lose jobs, and it's very, very difficult. And I personally hate that, and I think that everybody does. It has to make these decisions. It's one of the hardest things that we do. But government is not there. We're not there to employ people. We're not an employment agency. My view of government is that we should deliver the best services as efficiently as possible, and that should be what we strive for. What we should also strive for is to build a great city that people want to live in and that businesses want to come to. We've got to get more private sector growth in this city. We've got to find jobs for those people. Government can't employ everybody. Our tax rate is too high. We talk a lot about what it means when y'all in the media talk about tax increases and someone in a $150,000 home is going to pay $75 more a month. What we really need to look at is what the impact is on business, because businesses, a lot of companies are going to North Mississippi, DeSoto County. There hasn't been a new industrial building built in Memphis spec since 2008. All an industrial building is, it's an envelope to house capital and jobs. They are building them as fast as they can down in North Mississippi, over 3 million feet since 2008. They won't build them here. There's plenty of land. The major developers won't build them here because the tax rate is so high they simply can't do it.
Well, one of the criticisms, I'll turn to you, Jim Strickland, that the comptroller also highlighted was the reliance on pilots. And that gets into this very difficult dynamic where you've got pilots which basically forgive taxes to encourage development or encourage businesses to move into the city or county. Let's focus on the city. And forgive their taxes. The advocates of pilots will say, yeah, they may not pay those property taxes, but they bring in employees and they bring in other types of spending that fund city government and help the life of the city. The comptroller was real critical of that use. What is your take on that going forward?
Well, first, that's one issue we have not addressed. Kemp mentioned a couple other issues in the comptroller that we haven't addressed, that pilots we have not addressed, and we do need to address that. I wish there was a national law that prohibited every government in the United States from giving any incentive. And that would take care of the problem, because I hate these things. I'm very cheap. I don't like to give away money. But the problem is every state, every city in the country is giving incentives. And, for years we heard in Tennessee that we don't need an income tax because it will hurt business. Well, Mississippi actually uses their income tax to recruit businesses. They've turned it around and said, if you bring your business to Mississippi, we will take all the income tax that your employees take and give you some kind of kickback. So if we unilaterally withdraw and say we're not going to give any more pilots, we're not going to get any more businesses.
Yeah, I mean, right at the end of the Harrington administration, beginning of the Wharton administration, was it wasn't McKesson, but anyway, a big company that moved right across the border into Mississippi because they couldn't get the incentives from Memphis, Shelby County that they were remotely getting.
It was McKesson.
McKesson, excuse me. So McKesson,
yeah.
and they moved down into North Mississippi. It's the exact dynamic you're talking about.
But we do need to get fewer of them, and so we need to have like a real community debate on how we need the program, but maybe we don't need to use it as much.
Yeah, I'd like to see too. I mean, I don't think that the county, the companies pay the school portion. You know, in the city they don't. I think that makes sense. You know, paying a piece for the roads that they use, that makes sense. I think one thing, it's kind of like crack, where it goes for 10 years, you get a full abatement, then it just ends, and then these companies get a huge tax break. Then some of them will come back, or they'll move across the state line. So I think some kind of smoothing on it, where over time makes sense. But the reason we have to, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the reason we have to give the incentives is because our property taxes are too high. If we would have a more efficient government and lower our property tax rate, we wouldn't have to give the incentives. But and I'll say one other thing: economic development before this new council came in was dead. In 2007, 2008, when they had the residency requirement, this city was redlined in the economic development site selector community. There was nothing going on.
Right, and you'll hear people say,
we made changes, we got rid of that, and now we've got a lot going on. We need to have more. If you look at most of the pilots that were granted, I think almost 20, or 18, 16 of them have been retention pilots. I'm tired of hearing about Electrolux and Mitsubishi. I'm glad they're here, but we need to get some more companies moving into this community, not just people that are already here.
Right,
I'm glad those folks are expanding too. That's great, but I do think we need to work on this. And but we've got to get more private industry in here into this community.
5 minutes, Bill.
I think we may have found the first disagreement between you two, a former Democratic Party chairman and a former Republican Party chairman. Councilman Conrad, do you agree with him about a state income tax?
I don't think he was advocating for state income tax, but I don't agree we need one.
And I speak to a lot of groups, and they always. This is harder to do than I thought it was when I was sitting on my couch watching Jack Salmons and Tom Marshall and those guys argue it out at City Council. This is harder than it looks. So I'll go to groups and they'll always say, well, this is easy. Just get a payroll tax. Just put up toll roads. So part of my speech is it's illegal. It's forever going to be illegal. We can't do that. So put it aside. We got to rely. We're stuck with sales tax and property tax.
Well, I think too, on the incentives front, really because of the way the state of Tennessee does economic development with IDBs or industrial development boards and the pilot abatement, that's really the only economic development tool we have. Or kind of giving money out of capital funds for big moving sewers and stuff that people need. But we are very limited with the arrows in our quiver that we can, with the dollars that we can do.
Are both of you happy with EDGE, which is the new kind of program? I mean, do you feel like that combination of a bunch of disparate efforts that came together over the last couple of years real briefly?
I think the concept is great. I think so far they've worked good, but I do think we need to use fewer pilots.
Do you think EDGE as an entity, given the limited quiver they have, they're doing a good job, great job?
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea that we get that in one place. I think we really need to think about the role of what they do, what the chamber does, who's really leading economic development, who's recruiting. We've got all these various groups out there. We really need a holistic strategy where everybody working together. I feel a lot of times you've got all these different efforts underway.
Okay.
And
Bill.
I say yes.
I want to go back to a point you made on the restructuring. Are you saying that the restructuring that you all passed as part of this current budget process, are you saying it's not going to, the terms of it are going to change?
In terms of the...
In terms of its impact, that this is not going to satisfy the comptroller's letter or his concerns?
I think we satisfied a lot. I think you have to look at day-to-day operations of city government and then you got to look at the benefits. It's kind of like the country and Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, right? And it's the same thing with our pension plan and health care plan. I think we addressed a lot of the things around the day-to-day operations of city government. But I think when you look out over when our actuaries that we hire say, you guys have got to put another $100 million in, and we put in zero, that's a problem. We're going to be dealing with that starting in the next couple of weeks.
Let me ask you one thing, again, just a couple minutes left. People point to, real critics of the city budget and local government spending, to big projects, Bass Pro, FedEx Forum. We shouldn't be investing in places like Crosstown, the Sears Crosstown Tower, the improvements down Elvis Presley Boulevard, Overton Square, the big parking lot and redevelopment there. Do you feel like the city is spending an appropriate amount of money on big capital improvement projects?
Yes, because most of those projects that you talked about will pay for themselves. FedEx Forum is paying for itself. The Pyramid, the sales tax generated there will pay for itself. Overton Square, the increase in sales taxes, in my belief, is going to pay for the garage. The part of it that's dealing with water, I mean, that needs to come out of taxes anyway.
And Kim Conrad, these big ticket items that people point to and say that's just largesse and inappropriate government spending, do you feel like most or all the capital improvement projects are worthy expenses?
Well, first of all, I think most of the people saying that are the unions to deflect, to deflect from what some of the other real issues are. I do think that I do think we need to invest in our city. I'd just like to see more of a business-like approach to it, where we have more of a true plan. Not that this is the plan and nothing can be tweaked. Priorities are going to change. But I'll just give you an example. We did the $16 million for Overton Square, and then guess what? Well, we had to do $16 million in Whitehaven for Elvis Presley. We probably should have done that a long time ago, because that's a huge economic generator. But the point is, when there's no plan, there's no boundaries, then there's no discipline, and it becomes raw, brute political force, and we end up spending a lot more money on other things. So I just like to see a more business-like approach to it.
All right, you get the last word. Thank you for being here.
Thank you,
Jim Strickland. And again, we tried to have some other voices on, but it didn't work out for this week. Join us again next week. Good night.